Red and blue lights carved through the fog outside Mercy Ridge Medical Center, painting the asphalt in harsh, rhythmic color. No dispatch had been called. No emergency reported. Just a patrol car, idling near the staff lot, and two officers stepping out with the kind of deliberate swagger that said they weren't here to help. Emily Carter pushed through the side exit, her scrubs still damp from a 12-hour ER shift. Her shoulders ached. Her feet burned. All she wanted was to get home, collapse on the couch, and forget the screaming and the blood and the patient who'd coded twice before they finally got him back. Then she saw her husband. David was standing next to their sedan, hands raised, palms out, his face locked in that careful, controlled blankness she'd seen too many times before. An officer stood close, too close, barking something she couldn't hear yet. Another cop circled the car, flashlight sweeping the interior. Emily stopped mid-step. Her heartbeat didn't spike. It slowed, and in that moment, the exhausted nurse disappeared. If you want to see how a woman trained in war zones handles injustice in a parking lot, stay with me until the end. Drop a like, leave a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Emily didn't run. She walked. Steady, measured, the way she used to move through field hospitals when mortar fire was close enough to rattle the tent poles. "Sir, I already told you." David's voice was calm, but she heard the edge underneath. The officer cut him off. "I'll tell you when you can talk." Emily crossed the lot in silence, her eyes cataloging everything. Two officers, one older, gray at the temples, hands on his belt. One younger, mid-20s maybe, cocky posture, radio clipped too high on his chest. The younger one was doing the talking. The older one was watching. She stopped 6 feet back, close enough to hear, far enough to assess. "Everything okay here?" The younger officer, name tag read Briggs, didn't even glance at her. "Ma'am, step back. I'm asking a question, and I'm telling you to step back." His tone sharpened. "This is official business." David's eyes flicked toward her. She caught the look. The warning. Don't escalate. But Emily wasn't escalating. She was calculating. She shifted her weight, hands loose at her sides, and spoke again. Quieter this time. "What's the reason for the stop?" Briggs finally turned. He looked her up and down, scrubs, hospital badge still clipped to her chest, ponytail coming loose. Dismissed her in half a second. "Your husband was driving erratically. He's been parked here for 20 minutes. "Ma'am." "Emily." She didn't smile. "And you still haven't told me what law he broke." The older officer, Martinez, stepped forward. His voice was smoother, practiced. "We received a report of suspicious activity in the area. Just doing our job." "Suspicious activity?" Emily repeated it like she was tasting the words. "What activity?" "We're not required to disclose that. You're required to have reasonable suspicion for a detention. You're required to articulate that suspicion if asked." She paused. "So I'm asking." Briggs stiffened. "You a lawyer?" "No." "Then you don't know what you're talking about." David exhaled slowly, his hands still raised. "Em, it's fine. Let them finish." But Emily didn't move. She was watching Briggs now, the way his jaw tightened, the way his hand drifted toward his belt. Not his weapon, his cuffs. She'd seen that move before. Different uniform, different country. Same intent. "Sir," she said, her voice dropping into a register she hadn't used in years. "I need you to step back from my husband." "Excuse me?" "Step back." Briggs laughed. It was short, sharp, meant to humiliate. "Lady, you need to get back in your car and go home before you make this worse." "Worse for who?" The air between them tightened. Martinez put a hand on Briggs' shoulder, a subtle warning, but Briggs shrugged it off. "You're interfering with an investigation." "There's no investigation. There's no probable cause. And you've been detaining him for—" She glanced at her watch. 4 minutes without stating a reason. That's unlawful." "You threatening me?" "I'm informing you." Briggs took a step toward her, not aggressive, not yet, but testing, seeing if she'd flinch. Emily didn't. She'd stood in triage tents with incoming wounded and officers screaming orders in 3 different languages. She'd held pressure on ephemeral bleed while rockets hit close enough to shake the ground. She'd learned a long time ago that fear was just noise, and noise could be filtered out. "Ma'am?" Martinez tried again, his tone conciliatory. "We're just trying to do our jobs here. If you'd let us finish, then finish. Search the car, run his license, do whatever you need to do." She looked at Briggs. "But don't treat him like a criminal for standing in a parking lot." David's voice was low, urgent. Please." She heard the plea in it, the exhaustion, the resignation. How many times had he been stopped? How many times had he swallowed his anger, kept his hands visible, said yes, sir, and no, sir, just to get home safe? Too many. And she was done watching it happen. Briggs was staring at her now, his face flushed. "You got a problem with law enforcement?" I have a problem with bad law enforcement. You think you know my job? I know when someone's abusing their authority." Abusing? Briggs bit off the word, his hand twitching toward his radio. "You know what? Get his ID. We're taking him in." "On what charge?" Emily's voice didn't rise. It hardened. "Obstruction." "He hasn't obstructed anything. He refused to comply. He's been standing here with his hands up for 5 minutes. That's compliance." Martinez stepped between them, his hands up in a calming gesture. "Okay, everyone just take a breath." But Briggs wasn't listening. He moved toward David, pulling his cuffs free. "Turn around, hands behind your back." David didn't move. His eyes found Emily's, and in them she saw something she hated. Defeat, acceptance. "No." Emily stepped forward. "Badge number." Briggs froze. "What?" "Your badge number. I want it, now." He turned, eyes narrowing. "You don't get to demand—" "I have the right to identify any officer conducting a detention. That's law. So give me your badge number or I'll file a complaint for refusal to identify." Martinez's hand went to his radio. Not keying it, just resting there. A warning. Briggs's face went red. "You're really going to do this?" "I already am." For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the distant hum of the highway and the faint crackle of Martinez's radio. Then Briggs smiled. It wasn't friendly. "You want my badge number? Fine, 3847. Write it down. File whatever you want." He turned back to David. "But your husband's still coming with me." Emily's hand moved to her pocket. Slowly, deliberately. She pulled out her phone. "Then you're doing it on camera." Briggs' smile vanished. "You can't." "I can. And I am." She raised the phone, framing the scene. "Officer Briggs, badge 3847, detaining my husband without cause at Mercy Ridge Medical Center, 9:47 p.m. Please state the reason for detention." "Put that down." "No. I said put it down. And I said no." Her voice was ice. "You're a public servant conducting official business in a public place. I have every right to record this." Briggs lunged. He didn't grab the phone. He grabbed her wrist. Big mistake. Emily's training kicked in before thought did. She twisted, broke his grip, and stepped back in one smooth motion, phone still raised. Briggs stumbled, off balance, his face a mask of fury. "She assaulted me!" he shouted, whirling toward Martinez. "You saw that!" Martinez's expression was unreadable. "I saw you grab her." She resisted. "You grabbed a civilian who was recording. That's not protocol." Briggs' mouth opened, closed. He looked between Martinez and Emily, his anger turning to something sharper, panic. Emily lowered the phone but didn't put it away. Her heart was pounding now, adrenaline flooding her system, but her hands were steady. "You want to arrest me? Go ahead. But that footage is already uploading to the cloud, and I've got a lawyer on speed dial who specializes in civil rights cases." It wasn't a bluff. She didn't bluff. Briggs looked like he wanted to explode. But Martinez was already stepping in, his voice low and urgent. "We're done here. We're done." Martinez's tone left no room for argument. He turned to Emily, his expression carefully neutral. "Ma'am, I apologize for the confusion. We'll be leaving now." "What about my husband?" "He's free to go." David lowered his hand slowly, his shoulders sagging with relief. But Emily didn't move. She was still watching Briggs, who looked like he'd been slapped. "That's it?" Briggs said. "We're just going to let her—" Get in the car. Martinez's voice was flat, final. Briggs stared at him, then at Emily, then back. His jaw worked like he was chewing glass. Finally, he spun on his heel and stalked back to the patrol car, slamming the door hard enough to rock the vehicle. Martinez lingered for a moment, his eyes on Emily. You ex-military? She didn't answer. He nodded, like that was answer enough, and walked back to the cruiser. A moment later, the engine started and the red and blue lights cut out. The car pulled away, slow and deliberate, leaving the lot in sudden, eerie silence. David let out a breath he'd been holding for too long. Jesus, Em. She turned to him, and for the first time since she'd walked out of the hospital, she felt the adrenaline start to fade. Her hands were shaking now, just a little. Are you okay? He laughed. It was shaky, disbelieving. Am I okay? Em, you just went toe-to-toe with a cop. He had no right. I know. David pulled her into a hug, his arms tight around her. I know, but you can't. You can't do that every time. She pressed her face into his shoulder, breathing him in. Alive, safe, unhurt. Yes, she said quietly. I can. They didn't talk much on the drive home. David kept glancing at her, like he was trying to figure out if she was really okay or just pretending. Emily stared out the window, her mind already running through what came next. File a complaint. Document everything. Get the footage to someone who could use it. She'd dealt with worse. Corrupt officials in war zones. Officers who thought their rank made them untouchable. She knew how systems worked, knew where the pressure points were, and she knew how to apply pressure. By the time they pulled into their driveway, her hands had stopped shaking. David killed the engine but didn't get out. He sat there, staring at the dashboard. You scared me tonight, he said. Emily looked at him. I scared you? Yeah, because I know what happens when people fight back, and I know what you're capable of. She didn't deny it. She'd never lied to him about who she was, what she'd done, the places she'd been. I'm not going to let them treat you like that, she said. Not ever. I know. He reached over, taking her hand. But they don't know who you are, and that makes you dangerous. Emily smiled. It was a small, grim thing. Good. The video hit social media before midnight. Emily hadn't posted it. She didn't need to. Someone else in the parking lot had been recording too, a hospital orderly on a smoke break, phone angled just right to catch the whole confrontation. By morning, it had 20,000 views. By noon, 50. The headline read, Nurse confronts police over unlawful detention. You won't believe what happens next. Emily ignored it. She had a shift to finish, patients who needed her. A job that didn't stop just because the world outside was losing its mind over a parking lot standoff. But the hospital didn't ignore it. At 2 p.m., she was pulled into the administrative office. Dr. Raymond Voss, the hospital director, sat behind his desk with the expression of a man who'd just been handed a live grenade. Emily, sit. She sat. Voss folded his hands, his jaw tight. I've been getting calls all morning. From the press. From the police union. From people I don't even know. About the video. About you. He leaned back, his eyes hard. You put this hospital in a very difficult position. Emily's expression didn't change. I defended my husband from an unlawful detention. You antagonized a police officer. I recorded a police officer violating his own protocol. That's not your job. It's my right. Voss's mouth thinned. Rights don't matter if they cost you your job. Silence. Emily let the threat hang in the air between them. Let him hear how it sounded. Are you firing me? She asked, her voice calm. I'm strongly advising you to issue a public apology. Walk it back. Say it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. Emily, Dr. Voss. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. I spent 6 years as a combat medic in places you couldn't find on a map. I treated soldiers, civilians, and enemy combatants under fire. I learned how to prioritize life over politics. And I learned that silence in the face of injustice is just complicity with better PR. Voss stared at her. This isn't a war zone. No, it's worse. Because here, people think they can get away with it. He opened his mouth, closed it, rubbed his temples like she was giving him a migraine. I can't protect you if you keep pushing, he said finally. I'm not asking you to. Then what do you want? Emily stood. I want to do my job, save lives, go home to my husband. That's it. She turned toward the door. Emily? She stopped. Voss's voice was softer now, almost pitying. You're making enemies you can't afford. She looked back at him, her expression unreadable. I've made worse. Dushman. The fallout was immediate. The police union released a statement condemning the video as edited and misleading. They claimed Briggs had acted within protocol, that Emily had interfered with a lawful investigation, and that the biased narrative being pushed online was dangerous. The statement didn't mention David. It didn't mention the lack of probable cause. It didn't mention Briggs grabbing her wrist, but it did call her an agitator with a history of anti-authority behavior. Emily read it once, then deleted the email. She had work to do. 2 days later, the hospital was hit with a protest. Not against Emily, for her. 50 people showed up outside Mercy Ridge holding signs that read, "Support Nurse Carter," and "Accountability Now," and "Film the Police." Local news crews circled like sharks, shoving microphones at anyone who'd talk. Emily stayed inside, working her shift, ignoring the chaos. But the administration couldn't. At 4 p.m., Dr. Voss called her back into his office. This time, he wasn't alone. 2 lawyers sat on either side of him, their expressions cold and professional. Emily, Voss said, his voice strained, we need to discuss your future here. She sat down, her face calm. One of the lawyers slid a paper across the desk. This is a mutual separation agreement. You resign, we provide a severance package and a neutral reference. Clean break. Emily didn't touch the paper. You're firing me. We're offering you an exit. Because I stood up for my husband. The second lawyer leaned forward. Because you've become a liability. The board has concerns about your judgment, your ability to represent the hospital's values. My judgment. Emily's voice was flat. I work in the ER. I make life or death decisions every shift, and I've never lost a patient because I hesitated. This isn't about your medical skills. Then what is it about? Silence. Voss cleared his throat. Emily, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. She looked at him, really looked, saw the fear there, the desperation. He wasn't doing this because he wanted to. He was doing it because someone had leaned on him, hard. Who called you? She asked. That's not who called you. Voss's mouth opened, closed. He glanced at the lawyers, who shook their heads. Emily stood. I'm not signing anything. Then we'll have to terminate you for cause. On what grounds? Insubordination, conduct unbecoming of hospital staff. Violation of... I'll see you in court. She walked out before they could respond. The termination letter arrived by courier that evening. Emily read it sitting on her couch, David next to her, his hand on her knee. They really did it, he said quietly. Yeah. What are we going to do? Emily set the letter down and looked at him. We fight. They've got lawyers, money, the whole system backing them up. So did the officers I dealt with overseas. Didn't stop me then. David's jaw tightened. This isn't the same, isn't it? She stood, pacing. They think they can silence me, bury this, make me go away, but they're wrong. And if they win, they won't. How do you know? She stopped, turning to face him. Because I didn't survive 6 years in hell just to roll over for people like them. David stared at her, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not fear, not doubt, pride. Okay, he said. Then we fight. The lawsuit was filed 3 days later. Wrongful termination, retaliation, violation of her First Amendment rights. The hospital's lawyers tried to get it dismissed. Failed. The police union tried to intervene. Failed. And then the video went viral. Not the one from the parking lot. A new one. Someone had dug up footage from Emily's time in the service, a news clip from years ago, grainy and half forgotten, showing a field hospital under siege, wounded soldiers being carried in, medics working under fire, and there, in the background, was Emily. Younger, thinner, covered in dust and blood, but unmistakable. The clip ended with a voiceover from the reporter. "These are the people who run toward danger when everyone else runs away." The headline read, "War Hero Fired for Standing Up to Police." It had 5 million views in 2 days. But by the end of the week, Mercy Ridge was drowning. Donors pulled funding, staff threatened to walk, the board called an emergency meeting, and Emily got a phone call. "Ms. Carter?" The voice was crisp, professional. "My name is Lauren Hayes. I'm an attorney specializing in civil rights cases. I've been following your story, and I'd like to represent you, pro bono." Emily leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. "When can we start?" The deposition was brutal. Dr. Voss sat across from Emily and her lawyer, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly as he answered question after question. "Did you receive any external pressure to terminate Ms. Carter?" I don't recall." Lauren Hayes didn't blink. "Dr. Voss, you're under oath." "I received concerns from stakeholders." "What stakeholders?" "I can't. Did those stakeholders include members of the police union?" Voss's silence was damning. Hayes leaned forward. "Dr. Voss, did you fire Emily Carter because she exercised her constitutional right to record a public servant?" "No, Then why?" "Because she was disruptive." "Disruptive how?" "By saving lives, by doing her job, by making the hospital a target." The room went silent. Hayes sat back, her expression neutral. No further questions. The settlement offer came 2 weeks later. Full reinstatement, back pay, public apology, and a clause that prevented the hospital from retaliating in the future. Emily read it twice, then looked at Hayes. "What about Briggs?" "Separate fight, but the video's been subpoenaed. Internal Affairs is investigating." "Not good enough." Hayes smiled. "I know. That's why I filed a federal civil rights suit this morning." Emily blinked. "You what?" "Excessive force, unlawful detention, retaliation. We're going after him, Martinez, and the department." Hayes slid another folder across the table. "And we're going to win. But The trial took 6 months. By the time it was over, Officer Briggs was facing suspension, possible criminal charges, and a lawsuit that would haunt him for years. Martinez had been quietly reassigned, and the department had implemented new training protocols on recording and de-escalation. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Emily stood outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sun warm on her face. David was next to her, his arm around her shoulders. "You did it," he said. "We did it." He smiled. "How does it feel?" Emily thought about that, about the fear, the anger, the exhaustion, the moments when she'd wanted to give up, to walk away, to let someone else fight the fight. But she hadn't, because she'd learned a long time ago that some battles were worth fighting, even when the odds were stacked against you, even when the system was rigged, especially then. "It feels," she said slowly, "like I'm just getting started." David laughed. "God help them." Emily smiled. And somewhere, in a parking lot outside a hospital, the red and blue lights were gone. But the cameras were still rolling. But Emily didn't notice them anymore. She'd stopped checking the news, stopped reading the comments, stopped caring what strangers thought about a 30-second clip that had somehow defined her entire life for the past 6 months. The trial was over. The victory was real. And yet, standing on those courthouse steps with David's arm around her, she felt something she hadn't expected. Emptiness. Not regret, not doubt. Just the hollow ache that came after adrenaline burned out and left nothing but ash. "You okay?" David asked, his voice low enough that the reporters couldn't hear. "Yeah." She wasn't, but she would be. They walked to the car in silence, ignoring the shouted questions, the microphones thrust in their direction, the cameras tracking their every step. Emily had learned to tune it out. Noise. Just noise. But when they reached the parking garage, David stopped. "I need to tell you something," he said. Emily turned, reading the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was set. "What?" "I got a call this morning, from my boss." Her stomach tightened. "And?" "They're transferring me, out of state, effective immediately." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and sharp. "What?" Emily's voice came out flat. "Why?" David looked away, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "They said it's a promotion, better pay, better position, but the timing..." He shook his head. "It's not a promotion. It's a removal. They're punishing you." "Yeah." Emily felt the anger rise, hot and familiar. "For what? For being married to me?" "For being associated with a lawsuit that made the department look bad. For being the guy in the video. For existing." His voice cracked on the last word. "They can't fire me, so they're shipping me off to some branch office in the middle of nowhere and hoping I quit." "Did you tell them no?" David finally met her eyes. "I told them I'd think about it." "Think about it?" Emily's voice sharpened. "David, they don't get to do this. We just won. We won your fight, not mine." The words landed like a slap. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. Because he was right. The lawsuit had been about her termination, her rights, her vindication. David had been a footnote, a victim caught on camera, but the system didn't care about footnotes. "So what do you want to do?" she asked quietly. David rubbed his face, exhaustion bleeding through every line of his body. "I don't know. I'm tired, Em. I'm tired of fighting, tired of being the guy everyone stares at, tired of wondering if the next cop who pulls me over saw the video and has something to prove. Then we fight this too." "With what?" "We're broke. The settlement covered legal fees and bills, but we've got maybe 3 months before we're underwater again, and you haven't even been reinstated yet." "I will be." "And then what? You go back to the same hospital that threw you under the bus? Work for the same people who fired you to save their own asses?" He laughed, bitter and sharp. "That's not a win. That's a hostage situation." Emily wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that it would get better, that justice meant something. But the truth was, she didn't know if she believed that anymore. The trial had been won on paper, but the cost was still being tallied. They drove home in silence. The reinstatement letter arrived 3 days later, delivered by certified mail with all the warmth of a restraining order. Emily read it standing in the kitchen, her coffee going cold on the counter. "Effective immediately, you are reinstated to your position as RN in the emergency department at Mercy Ridge Medical Center. All back pay and benefits will be restored. We trust this resolves the matter to your satisfaction." No apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd put her through. Just a bureaucratic checkbox, ticked and filed away. Emily crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash. David walked in, saw the look on her face, and stopped. "That bad?" "They want me back." "Isn't that what you wanted?" "I wanted them to admit they were wrong. I wanted accountability. I got a form letter and a pat on the head." David poured himself coffee, his movements slow and deliberate. "So don't go back." "And do what? We need the money." "I'll take the transfer." Emily's head snapped up. "No. No. You are not sacrificing your career because they're too cowardly to do the right thing. It's not a sacrifice. It's survival. It's surrender." David set his mug down hard enough to slosh coffee onto the counter. "Then what do you want me to do? Huh? Fight another lawsuit? Spend another 6 months watching you tear yourself apart trying to prove a point? We won, Emily. We won, and we're still losing because we're letting them control the narrative. There is no narrative. There's just us trying to live our lives and a system that doesn't give a damn whether we do or not." His voice broke. "I'm not like you. I can't keep fighting battles I know I'll lose." Emily stared at him, and for the first time since they'd met, she didn't know what to say. Because he was right. She'd spent 6 years in war zones learning how to fight, how to compartmentalize, how to push through pain and fear and exhaustion because the mission mattered more than the cost. But David hadn't, and she'd been asking him to fight a war he never signed up for. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice small. David exhaled, the anger draining out of him. "I know. Me too." They stood there in the wreckage of their kitchen, two people who loved each other but didn't know how to fix what was breaking between them. Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, expecting another reporter, another vulture looking for a quote. Instead, it was a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello? Ms. Carter?" The voice was male, clipped, professional. "My name is Colonel James Ryder. I'm calling from Joint Base Ashford. Do you have a moment?" Emily's pulse kicked up. "I'm listening. I've been following your case. Impressive work. You handled yourself well. Thank you. I'm calling because we have a situation. Medical emergency. Mass casualty event. And we're short-staffed." He paused. "I need experienced combat medics. People who can think under pressure. People like you." Emily's breath caught. "I'm not active duty anymore." "I know. This would be contract work, civilian consultant, 3 months, full benefits, and it pays well." "How well?" He named a figure that made her knees weak. "When do you need an answer?" she asked. 24 hours. The line went dead. Emily stood there, phone pressed to her ear, her mind racing. David was watching her. "Who was that?" "The military. They want me for a contract job." "Doing what?" "What I'm good at." David's expression shifted. Fear, anger, resignation, all of it flickering across his face in the span of a heartbeat. "You're going to say yes?" "I don't know. Yes, you do." Emily set the phone down, her hands shaking. "David, it's fine." His voice was hollow. "Take the job. We need the money. And maybe we both need some space." The words cut deeper than any argument could have, because he was right about that too. Emily reported to Joint Base Ashford 2 weeks later, her duffel slung over one shoulder, her mind locked into the same cold focus she'd relied on overseas. The base was massive, sprawling across 200 acres of concrete and chain link, helicopters thundering overhead every few minutes. She checked in at the gate, got her credentials, and was escorted to the medical wing by a sergeant who didn't waste words. "Colonel Ryder's waiting for you in conference room B," he said, then left her at the door. Emily knocked once and entered. Ryder was older than she'd expected, mid-50s with gray hair and the kind of posture that came from 30 years of service. He stood when she walked in, extending a hand. "Ms. Carter, thank you for coming." She shook it. "Colonel." "Sit." He gestured to a chair, then slid a folder across the table. "This is the situation. 10 days ago, a training exercise went wrong. 18 injured, 7 critical. We stabilized them, but 2 are still in bad shape. Traumatic brain injuries, complex reconstructive needs, and our head of trauma just went on medical leave." Emily opened the folder, scanning the charts. The injuries were severe, the kind of damage that required precision, experience, and nerves that didn't flinch. "You want me to lead the team?" she said. "I want you to save their lives." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Why me?" "You've got 100 qualified surgeons on base." "Because you've done this before, under worse conditions, and because every surgeon I've talked to says the same thing. You don't panic." He leaned forward. "I need someone who won't break when things go sideways." Emily closed the folder. "What's the catch?" Ryder smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The catch is that if you fail, 2 soldiers die, and if you succeed, you'll have done your job. There's no glory here, no medals, just the work." "I don't need glory." "Good, because this base doesn't give it." Emily stood. "When do I start?" "Now." The trauma wing was chaos. Nurses shouted orders, machines beeped in overlapping rhythms, and the smell of antiseptic hung thick in the air. Emily moved through it like she'd never left, her mind cataloging details, prioritizing, assessing. The first patient was a 23-year-old corporal with a skull fracture and brain swelling. The second was a lieutenant with shrapnel embedded in his spine. Both were stable. Barely. Emily scrubbed in, her hands moving through the familiar motions, and stepped into the OR. The surgery took 9 hours. When it was over, the corporal was alive, the swelling reduced, the pressure relieved. Emily stripped off her gloves and stepped into the hallway, her scrubs soaked with sweat, her legs shaking from standing too long. Colonel Ryder was waiting. "How'd it go?" he asked. "He'll live. The lieutenant's next." Ryder nodded. "Good work." Emily leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. "Don't thank me yet." The lieutenant's surgery was scheduled for the next morning. Emily went back to her quarters, collapsed on the cot, and didn't dream. The second surgery was worse. The shrapnel had nicked the spinal cord, and every movement risked permanent paralysis. Emily worked in millimeters, her hands steady, her focus absolute. The team around her was good, experienced, professional, silent when it mattered. But halfway through, the patient's blood pressure dropped. "He's crashing," the anesthesiologist said. Emily didn't look up. "Epi, now!" The nurse moved fast, injecting the drug. The monitors stabilized, barely. "Talk to me," Emily said, her voice calm. "BP's holding, heart rate's climbing, we're good." "For now." She kept working. The surgery took 12 hours. When it was done, the lieutenant was stable, the shrapnel removed, the spinal cord intact. Emily stepped out of the OR and nearly collapsed. Ryder caught her arm. "Easy. I'm fine. You're exhausted. I'm functional." She pulled free, steadying herself. "He's going to need physical therapy, months of it, maybe years, but he'll walk." Ryder's expression softened. "You did good, Carter." Emily didn't respond. She just walked away, her body moving on autopilot, her mind already shutting down. She didn't make it to her quarters. She made it to the bathroom, locked the door, and threw up. The nightmares came back that night. Not the ones from the trial. The old ones. The ones she thought she'd buried. Explosions. Screaming. Blood pooling faster than she could stop it. Faces she couldn't save staring at her with eyes that didn't blink. She woke up gasping, her sheets soaked, her heart hammering. It was 3 a.m. Emily sat on the edge of the cot, head in her hands, trying to breathe. She'd been here before. The crash after the high, the cost of compartmentalizing, the price of being the one who didn't break. But this time, there was no mission to distract her, just the silence, and the weight of everything she'd been running from. Popped. 2 days later, Colonel Ryder called her into his office. "Sit," he said. Emily sat. Ryder pulled out a file, thicker than the first one, and slid it across the desk. "I've got another situation, bigger, messier, and I need someone I can trust." Emily opened the file. It was a deployment, not stateside, overseas. "Where?" she asked. "Classified. For now." Ryder leaned back. "What I can tell you is that it's a humanitarian mission. Refugee camp, thousands of displaced civilians. Medical infrastructure is non-existent, and we're setting up a field hospital." "For how long?" 6 months, maybe longer." Emily stared at the file, her mind racing. 6 months, away from David, away from the trial, away from everything that had been suffocating her since the parking lot. "I need to think about it," she said. "You've got 48 hours. She called David that night. "Hey," he said, his voice distant. "Hey." Silence. "I got offered another contract," she said finally. "Of course you did. It's overseas, 6 months." More silence. "Are you going to take it?" he asked. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." Emily closed her eyes. "David?" "It's fine, Em. Really, you should go. Do what you're good at. I'll figure things out here." "That's not fair." "No, but it's honest." His voice cracked. "I love you. But I can't keep waiting for you to come back from wars I can't see. I'm not at war. Aren't you? The line went quiet. I need you to understand something, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not running. I'm trying to survive. So am I. She heard the pain in his voice, the exhaustion, the resignation, and she realized with a clarity that hurt that they were both drowning, just in different oceans. I'll call you tomorrow, she said. Okay. The line went dead. Emily sat in the dark, staring at the phone, and felt something inside her crack. Not break. Crack. She took the contract. 48 hours later, she was on a transport plane, her duffel strapped to the seat next to her, the roar of the engines drowning out everything else. No goodbye, no closure, just a text to David that said, I'm sorry, I love you. I'll explain when I get back. He didn't respond. The plane landed in a country Emily had never been to, in a camp surrounded by barbed wire and canvas tents. The heat hit her like a wall, thick and suffocating, and the smell, dust and sweat and desperation, was immediate. Colonel Ryder met her on the tarmac. Welcome to hell, he said. Emily shouldered her duffel. I've seen worse. You haven't seen this. He led her through the camp, past rows of makeshift shelters, past children with hollow eyes and mothers clutching babies too quiet to be healthy. The field hospital was a cluster of tents held together by hope and duct tape, generators humming in the background, medical supplies stacked in crates that didn't look like they'd last the week. This is it? Emily asked. This is it. She stepped inside and froze, because standing in the center of the tent, scrubbing in for surgery, was someone she hadn't seen in 8 years, someone she thought she'd never see again. Dr. Marcus Wells turned, saw her, and went pale. Carter? His voice was a rasp. What the hell are you doing here? Emily's throat tightened, because the last time she'd seen Marcus Wells, he'd been standing over a dying patient, hands shaking, eyes wild, making a call that had cost them both everything. And now he was here, in charge. Emily didn't move. Couldn't. The tent seemed to shrink around her, the noise of the camp fading into a dull roar as her mind dragged her back 8 years to a different field hospital, a different crisis, a different version of herself that had trusted Marcus Wells with her career. He looked older now, thinner, gray streaking through hair that used to be dark, lines carved deep around his eyes. But those eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, and right now, afraid. Carter, he said again, quieter this time. I asked you a question. Emily found her voice. Ryder didn't tell me you were running this operation. Would you have come if he had? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Marcus turned back to the surgical tray, his hands moving with practiced efficiency, but she saw the tremor, barely there, just enough to tell her he was rattled. We've got incoming, he said, his voice clipped. Convoy hit an IED 20 clicks out. Multiple casualties. ETA 15 minutes. You can hate me later. Right now, I need you to scrub in. Emily's training kicked in before her anger could. She dropped her duffel, moved to the scrub station, and started washing. The water was lukewarm, the soap gritty, but her hands moved on autopilot, forearms between the fingers, under the nails. Muscle memory older than the grudge. Marcus was talking to the nursing staff, his tone calm but urgent. I want 2 ORS prepped. Blood warmers online. Get me a count on O-Niji. A nurse, young, maybe 25, with the kind of deer-in-headlights look that said this was her first deployment, stammered, We're down to 6 units. 6? Marcus's voice went flat. We had 20 this morning. There was a surge last night, civilian casualties from the shelling. I don't care what we used. I care what we have. 6 units won't cover half of what's coming. He turned to another nurse. Radio the supply depot. Tell them we need blood and plasma now, not tomorrow, now. Emily dried her hands, pulled on gloves, and stepped into the OR tent. It smelled like every field hospital she'd ever worked in, antiseptic, trying to mask sweat and fear, and the metallic tang of blood that never quite washed out of the canvas. Marcus joined her a moment later, his gloves snapping into place. They stood on opposite sides of the table, the space between them loaded with 8 years of silence. "You still remember the protocols, Hermes?" he asked. "Yeah." "Good. Because if you freeze, I don't freeze." His jaw tightened. "Neither did I. But that didn't stop you from blaming me." Emily's hands curled into fists. "This isn't the time. You're the one who brought it up. I didn't bring up anything. You did, by being here." The tent flap burst open, cutting off whatever Marcus was about to say. 2 medics rushed in carrying a stretcher, a soldier strapped down, his uniform shredded and soaked red. Behind them came another stretcher. Then another. Marcus moved. "Talk to me." The lead medic rattled off vitals like he was reading a grocery list. "Male, mid-20s, shrapnel to the abdomen and left leg. BP's dropping, pulse thready. He's been on fluids for 10 minutes, but he's not responding." Emily was already assessing. She pulled back the bandage on his abdomen, and her stomach tightened. The wound was deep, ragged, actively bleeding. Shrapnel was still embedded in the tissue, and she could see the dark pulse of arterial flow. "He's got a bleeder," she said. "Femoral, maybe iliac. We need to get him open now." Marcus was on the other patient, hands moving fast. "This one's got a collapsed lung and a head wound, pupils unequal, possible skull fracture." "Which one do we take first?" the young nurse asked, her voice cracking. Emily and Marcus exchanged a look. For a split second, the history between them evaporated, replaced by the cold calculus of triage. "I'll take the abdominal bleed," Emily said. "You stabilize the head wound. If his pressure drops, we lose him before we can do anything." Marcus nodded. "Agreed. Let's move." The next 2 hours were a blur of blood and adrenaline and decisions made in fractions of seconds. Emily's hands worked faster than her mind, clamping bleeders, irrigating wounds, pulling shrapnel from tissue that tore like wet paper. The soldier on her table arrested twice. Both times she brought him back, her voice sharp and steady as she called for drugs, for blood, for the defibrillator that barely had enough charge left to shock his heart into compliance. When it was over, he was alive. Barely, but alive. She stepped back, her scrubs drenched, her arms shaking from the sustained tension. Across the tent, Marcus was closing up his patient, his movements slower now, exhaustion bleeding through. "Status?" Emily asked. "Stable, for now." Marcus stripped off his gloves, tossed them in the bin. "Yours?" "Same." They stood there in the wreckage of the OR, the floor slick with blood, instruments scattered across trays, monitors beeping in overlapping rhythms. The nursing staff was already cleaning up, prepping for the next wave. Because there was always a next wave. Marcus walked past her without a word, pushed through the tent flap, and disappeared into the camp. Emily followed. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked too beautiful for a place this broken. Marcus was leaning against a supply crate, his head tipped back, eyes closed. "You did good in there," he said without opening his eyes. Emily crossed her arms. Don't what?" "Pretend like we're colleagues, like nothing happened." Marcus opened his eyes, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he looked at her, really looked. "I'm not pretending. I know exactly what happened, and I know you'll never forgive me for it." "You made a call that got people killed." "I made a call that saved 3 lives at the cost of 1. That's triage, Carter. You know that. It wasn't your call to make." "Yes, it was. I was the senior surgeon. The decision was mine." Emily felt the anger rising, hot and familiar. "You didn't even ask. There wasn't time to ask. The patient was coding, we had 2 others bleeding out, and you were up to your elbows in a chest cavity. So I made the call. And yeah, we lost someone, but we saved 3. That's the job. The job doesn't include throwing me under the bus when the review board came down." Marcus's expression hardened. "I didn't throw you under the bus. I told the truth. You disagreed with my decision. You said so in the OR, in front of witnesses. What was I supposed to do? Lie? You were supposed to back me up." "I did. I told them you were a damn good medic who got caught in an impossible situation. But I wasn't going to lie and say I made the wrong call just to make you feel better. Emily's hands were shaking. That call ended my career. No, your refusal to accept it ended your career. You could have moved on, could have kept working, but you filed a complaint, escalated it, made it a crusade. And when the board sided with me, you walked away. He pushed off the crate, stepped closer. So don't stand there and tell me I ruined your life. You did that yourself. The words landed like a punch. Emily wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was wrong, that he'd twisted the facts to save his own skin. But a small, vicious part of her wondered if he was right, if she'd been so focused on being right that she'd lost sight of what mattered. I'm not doing this, she said, her voice tight. I came here to do a job. That's it. So stay out of my way and I'll stay out of yours. She turned and walked away before he could respond. The camp was worse at night. The generators hummed, casting the tents in harsh yellow light, and the sounds of pain, moans, cries, the occasional scream drifted through the air like smoke. Emily made her rounds, checking on the patients from the convoy, adjusting IVs, recalculating dosages. The soldier with the abdominal bleed was holding steady, his vitals stable enough that she felt comfortable stepping away. She found a quiet corner of the supply tent, sat on a crate, and pulled out her phone. No signal. She stared at the blank screen, David's last text still sitting unanswered in her messages. The words blurred as she read them again. She typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. What was she supposed to say? That she was sorry? That she didn't know how to be anything other than what she was? That she'd chosen this because the alternative was drowning in a life that felt like it was crushing her from the inside out? None of that would fix what was broken. So she put the phone away and went back to work. The next morning brought a different kind of crisis. Emily was checking vitals on a civilian patient, a woman who'd lost her leg to a landmine, when one of the local interpreters rushed in, his face pale. Dr. Carter, you need to come, now. Emily followed him outside to the perimeter fence where a crowd had gathered. Children mostly, some adults, all of them shouting in a language she didn't understand. The interpreter pointed to a young girl, maybe 8 years old, being carried by her father. The girl's skin was gray, her breathing labored, her lips tinged blue. Respiratory distress, Emily said, already moving. Get her inside. They brought the girl to the exam tent. Emily did a quick assessment. No visible trauma, no obvious injuries, but her oxygen saturation was dropping fast, her chest barely moving despite the effort. How long has she been like this, Missa? Emily asked through the interpreter. The father's response came rapid fire, desperate. 2 days, the interpreter translated. Started with cough, then fever. Now she can't breathe. Emily's mind ran through possibilities. Pneumonia, infection, maybe TB. She needed x-rays, labs, antibiotics. But the portable x-ray was down for repairs. The lab equipment was limited and their antibiotic supply was already stretched thin from the convoy casualties. Start her on oxygen, Emily ordered. High flow. And get me Dr. Wells. Marcus arrived 2 minutes later, took one look at the girl and cursed under his breath. Thoughts? He asked. Bacterial pneumonia, most likely, but without imaging or labs, I'm guessing. What's her SAT? 82 and dropping. Marcus checked the girl's pupils, listened to her lungs. The crackles were audible even without a stethoscope. She needs intubation. We don't have pediatric tubes. Then we improvise. Again. He looked at the father, then at Emily. You speak any Arabic? Enough to ask for help, not enough for this. Marcus turned to the interpreter. Tell him we need to put a breathing tube in her throat. It's going to look scary, but it's the only way to save her life. Ask if he understands. The interpreter translated. The father nodded, tears streaming down his face, and stepped back. Emily and Marcus worked in sync, the years of hostility evaporating under the weight of necessity. They didn't have the right equipment, so they made do, using an adult tube cut down, a makeshift airway secured with tape and prayer. The girl's oxygen levels stabilized, her chest rising and falling with the mechanical rhythm of the ventilator they jury-rigged from spare parts. How long can we keep her on this? Emily asked. As long as we have to, Marcus said. But she needs real antibiotics. The broad-spectrum stuff we've got isn't going to cut it for much longer. The supply convoy. is still 2 days out, maybe 3. Emily looked down at the girl, so small on the cot, her life sustained by equipment that could fail at any moment. She doesn't have 3 days. I know. They stood there in silence, two people who'd spent years at war with each other, now fighting the same losing battle against time and scarcity and a world that didn't care how hard they tried. The interpreter cleared his throat. Her father wants to know if she will live. Emily and Marcus exchanged a look. Tell him we're doing everything we can, Marcus said finally. It wasn't an answer, but it was the only truth they had. Over the next 36 hours, the camp descended into controlled chaos. 3 more children came in with similar symptoms: respiratory distress, fever, the same gray pallor that spoke of infection spreading faster than they could contain it. The adults weren't immune either. 2 elderly patients developed complications, their lungs filling with fluid, their bodies too weak to fight. Emily worked until she couldn't see straight, until her hands cramped and her back screamed and the edges of her vision started to blur. Marcus was the same, pushing through exhaustion with the grim determination of someone who'd forgotten how to stop. They set up a makeshift quarantine area, separating the respiratory cases from the trauma patients. They rationed antibiotics down to the milligram, calculating dosages with a precision born of desperation. They took turns monitoring the ventilators, the oxygen tanks, the IV pumps that kept failing because the power supply was inconsistent at best. On the second night, the young nurse, the one who'd been so scared during the first convoy casualties, found Emily in the supply tent, her eyes red from crying. "We're out of saline," she said. Emily looked up from the inventory list she'd been staring at for the past 20 minutes. "What do you mean out?" "I mean, we used the last bag an hour ago, and the next supply drop isn't until I know when the supply drop is." Emily rubbed her face, trying to think through the fog of exhaustion. "Okay, we boil water from the well, add salt, filter it through cloth. It's not sterile, but it's better than nothing." "Doctor, Wells already said no. He said the risk of contamination is too high." "Then what does he suggest we do? Let them dehydrate?" The nurse didn't answer. Emily pushed past her, strode across the camp to the main medical tent where Marcus was adjusting a ventilator on one of the children. "We need to talk," she said. Marcus didn't look up. "Not now." "Yes, now. We're out of saline. And if we don't improvise something, we're going to start losing people to dehydration before the infections even get them. I'm not giving patients unsterile fluids. It's boiled water and salt. That's not unsterile, it's not medical grade, which means it's contaminated, which means I'm not authorizing it." Emily felt her control snap. "Then what do you want me to do, Marcus? Stand here and watch them die because we're too worried about protocol? Protocol exists for a reason. Protocol exists for hospitals with resources. We're in a refugee camp with duct tape and hope holding this place together. So either we adapt or we fail. Your choice." Marcus straightened, his face flushed. "You don't get to make that choice. I'm the senior medical officer, and I'm the one who's been keeping half these patients alive while you've been hiding behind regulations that don't mean anything out here." Emily stepped closer, her voice dropping to something cold and sharp. 8 years ago, you made a call, a hard call, a call that saved lives, and you were right to make it. But now when it matters, you're too scared to do the same thing." The tent went silent. Even the ventilators seemed to quiet, the soft hiss of oxygen the only sound. Marcus stared at her, something breaking in his eyes. "You think I'm scared?" "I think you're so afraid of making another mistake that you've forgotten how to make any decision at all." He opened his mouth, closed it, looked down at the child on the ventilator, so small and fragile, her chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. "Fine," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Boil the water, filter it twice, and if anyone gets septic from it, that's on you." "No," Emily said. "It's on both of us. That's how this works." They set up a makeshift water purification station, boiling well water in salvaged pots, adding measured amounts of salt, filtering it through layers of cloth until it was as clean as they could make it. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. The first patient they gave it to was the 8-year-old girl on the ventilator. Her IV had run dry an hour ago, and her skin was starting to lose elasticity, the first sign of dangerous dehydration. Emily hung the bag, adjusted the drip rate, and watched. Nothing happened. No adverse reaction. No sudden decline. Just the steady drip of improvised saline keeping her alive for another hour. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Marcus appeared at her shoulder. "How's she doing?" "Stable." "Good." He paused. "You were right, earlier, about me being scared." Emily looked at him, surprised. "I've been making safe calls for so long I forgot what it felt like to take a risk," he continued. "After what happened with you, with the review board, I promised myself I'd never put my career on the line again, that I'd follow every rule, check every box, cover every angle." He laughed, bitter and tired. "But out here, there are no safe calls, just choices, and all of them are hard." "Yeah," Emily said quietly, "they are." They stood there in the dim light of the medical tent, two broken people trying to hold together something that kept threatening to fall apart. The attack came without warning. Emily was checking on the quarantine patients when the first explosion hit. The ground shook, dust raining from the tent ceiling, and the lights flickered. She grabbed the nearest IV pole to steady herself, her ears ringing from the blast. "What was that?" someone shouted. Emily was already moving, muscle memory taking over. "Everyone stay calm. Get the mobile patients to the interior tents. Now!" Another explosion, closer this time. The tent walls rippled, and she heard screaming from outside. She pushed through the flap into chaos. The eastern perimeter was on fire, black smoke billowing into the sky. Soldiers were running, weapons raised, shouting coordinates into radios. And in the middle of it all, bodies, some moving, some not. Marcus appeared next to her, his face grim. "Mortar fire. They're targeting the camp." "How many wounded?" "Don't know yet, but we're about to find out." The casualties started arriving in waves. Soldiers, civilians, a child with shrapnel in her back, an old man with half his face burned. Emily's hands moved on autopilot, assessing, triaging, making impossible decisions about who got treatment first and who had to wait. Green, yellow, red, black, the categories that separated the living from the dying. She was working on a soldier with a sucking chest wound when the power went out. Complete darkness for 3 seconds, then the emergency generators kicked in, bathing everything in sickly red light. "We need to move the critical patients to the bunker," Marcus shouted over the noise. "If they hit the medical tents directly." "We don't have a bunker." "The supply cellar. It's reinforced. It'll have to do." They started moving patients, dragging gurneys across uneven ground while explosions continued to rock the camp. Emily's arms burned. Her lungs screamed, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. She was halfway to the cellar with a patient when she heard it. A sound that made her blood freeze. The high-pitched whistle of an incoming mortar. Close. Too close. "Down!" someone screamed. Emily threw herself over the gurney, shielding the patient with her body. The explosion hit 20 meters away, close enough that the shockwave picked her up and slammed her into the ground. Her head cracked against something hard, and the world went white. When her vision cleared, she was on her back, staring up at a sky filled with smoke. Her ears were ringing so loud she couldn't hear anything else. She tried to sit up, and her ribs screamed in protest. Broken. At least 2. She rolled onto her side, gasping, and saw the gurney. It had been thrown sideways, the patient, still strapped down, lying in the dirt. Emily crawled over, her hands shaking as she checked for a pulse. There. Weak, but there. She looked around for help, but everyone was scattered, dealing with their own crises. She grabbed the gurney, tried to pull it, and nearly blacked out from the pain. Not broken ribs. Fractured. Maybe worse. She tried again anyway. Someone grabbed her arm. "Marcus." "Let me," he said. You can barely stand. Let me." He took the gurney, started pulling. Emily stumbled after him, one hand pressed to her side, each breath a knife. They made it to the cellar. Barely. Inside it was cramped, dark, filled with the sound of labored breathing and quiet crying. Emily collapsed against the wall, her vision swimming. Marcus knelt next to her. "Let me see. I'm fine." "You're not. Lift your shirt." She did. The left side of her torso was already turning purple, the bruising dark and spreading. Marcus pressed gently, and Emily hissed through her teeth. 2 fractured ribs, maybe 3, he said. You need to stay still. I need to work. You need to not puncture a lung. People are dying, and you'll join them if you don't sit down. His voice cracked. Please, Emily, just sit down. She looked at him and saw the fear in his eyes. Not for himself, for her. So she sat. The bombardment lasted 4 hours. By the time it stopped, the camp was in ruins. 3 tents completely destroyed. The eastern perimeter breached. 17 confirmed dead, 32 wounded, and their already depleted supplies were now scattered across a battlefield. Emily sat in the cellar, her side screaming, and watched Marcus move between patients with the kind of desperate efficiency that came from knowing you were running out of time. The young nurse found them an hour after the all-clear. Dr. Wells, she said, her voice shaking. The girl, the one on the ventilator. Emily's heart sank. What about her? Marcus asked. The generator that was powering her vent took shrapnel. It's dead. And we don't have another one. Marcus closed his eyes. How long has she been off the ventilator? 20 minutes. Emily stood, ignoring the pain. Is someone bagging her? Yes, but then she's still alive. We keep her alive. She looked at Marcus. We take turns, manual ventilation, every breath, however long it takes. Emily, that's not sustainable. I don't care. We don't let her die because we ran out of equipment. Marcus stared at her, and something in his expression shifted. Resolve replacing despair. Okay, he said. We take turns. They set up a rotation, 20 minutes per person, squeezing the bag to force air into the girl's lungs, maintaining a rhythm that meant life or death. Emily took the first shift, her fractured ribs screaming with every compression, but she didn't stop. Marcus took the second shift, then the young nurse, then a medic who'd been injured in the attack but could still use his hands. Hours passed. The sun set. The camp slowly pulled itself back together, putting out fires, clearing rubble, accounting for the dead. And in a corner of the medical tent, a rotation of exhausted people kept a little girl breathing through sheer refusal to let go. Emily was on her 4th shift, her hands cramping, her side on fire, when Colonel Ryder appeared. Carter, he said quietly. She didn't stop squeezing the bag. Colonel, I got word from command. The supply convoy is delayed another 48 hours, maybe more. Emily's rhythm didn't falter. Understood. How bad is it? We're out of almost everything. Saline, antibiotics, pain meds, gauze. We're improvising where we can, but she met his eyes. We're not going to make it another 48 hours, not without losing people. Ryder was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, What do you need? A miracle. Can't do miracles, but I can make a call. He left. 20 minutes later, Marcus took over the bag, and Emily collapsed onto a cot, her entire body shaking from exhaustion and pain. You should sleep, Marcus said. Can't. It's my turn again in 10 minutes. Someone else can take it. No, I made a promise. Marcus looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen in 8 years. Respect. You're going to kill yourself doing this, he said softly. Probably. Then why? Emily thought about that. About David, alone and angry and 1,000 miles away. About Briggs and the parking lot, and the lawsuit that had cost her everything. About a career that had ended because she'd refused to stay quiet. About all the battles she'd fought, and the ones she'd lost, and the ones she was still fighting. Because someone has to, she said finally. The radio crackled. Ryder's voice came through, sharp and clear. All personnel, this is command. We have inbound emergency medevac. ETA, 30 minutes. Prepare to receive critical patients for transport. Emily sat up, ignoring her ribs. He got us a medevac? Marcus was already on his feet. He got us more than that. If they're taking critical patients, that means they're bringing supplies. Hope. The first real hope they'd felt in days. They spent the next 30 minutes preparing, clearing space, getting patients ready for transport. The girl on manual ventilation was first priority, then the other children in respiratory distress. Then the most critically wounded soldiers. The helicopter came in low and fast, rotors beating the air into submission. It landed in a clearing 50 meters from the medical tent, and medics poured out carrying cases of supplies. Real supplies. Sterile saline, antibiotics, ventilators, blood products. Emily wanted to cry, but there wasn't time. They loaded the girl onto the helicopter first, the manual bag finally replaced by a proper ventilator. Her father climbed in next to her, his face a mask of desperate gratitude. The other patients followed. When the helicopter lifted off, Emily stood in the rotor wash and watched it disappear into the darkening sky. Marcus stood next to her. "We did it. We got lucky. No, we fought. There's a difference." Emily turned to look at him. "Is there?" Before he could answer, an explosion lit up the horizon. Not close, but close enough, and then another, and another. The radio erupted. "All stations, this is command. We have hostile forces moving on the camp. All personnel to defensive positions. Medical staff, prepare for mass casualties. This is not a drill." Emily looked at Marcus. He looked back, and in that moment, they both knew. The worst was just beginning. Emily grabbed her medical kit, her fractured ribs screaming with every movement, and ran toward the armory tent where Ryder was already barking orders into his radio. Marcus was right behind her, his face set in the kind of grim determination she remembered from their first deployment together, back when they'd both been younger and stupider and thought they could save everyone. "How many?" Marcus asked. Ryder didn't look up from the map spread across the table. "Unknown. At least 24 hostiles, possibly more. They hit our southern checkpoint 10 minutes ago, killed 3 guards. Now they're pushing toward the camp." "What do they want?" Emily asked. "Medical supplies, food, weapons, whatever they can take." Ryder's jaw tightened. "And they don't care who they have to kill to get it." Another explosion lit the horizon closer now. The ground trembled. "We need to evacuate the patients," Marcus said. "To where?" Ryder gestured at the map. "We're surrounded on 3 sides by hostile territory. The only way out is north, and that route's already compromised. We evacuate now. We'll be sitting ducks on an open road." "So we stay and fight?" "We stay and hold until reinforcements arrive." Emily felt her stomach drop. "How long until reinforcements?" Ryder's silence was answer enough. "We're on our own," she said quietly. "For now." Ryder folded the map. "I need both of you in the medical tent. Keep the patients calm, keep them stable. If hostiles breach the perimeter, we fall back to the bunker." "The bunker can't hold everyone," Marcus said. "Then you prioritize. That's an order." He left before either of them could argue. Emily and Marcus stood there, the sounds of distant gunfire growing steadily closer, and looked at each other. "This is bad," Marcus said. "Yeah. We're not equipped for this." "I know. People are going to die." Emily's hands tightened on her medical kit. "Not if I can help it." They ran. The medical tent was chaos. Patients were crying, some trying to get out of their beds despite injuries that made walking impossible. The nursing staff was doing their best to maintain order, but fear was contagious, and it was spreading fast. Emily moved through the tent, her voice calm and steady despite the pain radiating from her ribs. "Everyone stay where you are. We're safe here. The soldiers are handling the situation." It was a lie, but it was a necessary one. She reached the young nurse, still didn't know her name, had never thought to ask, who was trying to calm a patient having a panic attack. "What do you need me to do?" the nurse asked, her voice shaking. "Keep them calm. Keep them breathing. And if shooting starts inside the perimeter, you get everyone who can move to the cellar. Understood? What about the ones who can't move?" Emily didn't have an answer for that. The gunfire got closer. Marcus appeared at her side, his face pale. "We've got a problem." "What now?" "The ventilators. They're running on the backup generator, and it's almost out of fuel." "How long?" "Maybe an hour. Less if we keep losing power." Emily looked at the 3 patients on mechanical ventilation. All children, all barely clinging to life. Without the ventilators, they'd suffocate in minutes. "We need to get them on the medevac," she said. "There is no medevac. The helicopter left 20 minutes ago, and command said they can't send another one until the airspace is clear. Then we manual ventilate again. For how long? An hour? 2? We don't have the staff. An explosion cut him off. Close. Too close. The tent shook, supplies tumbling from shelves, a patient screaming. Emily grabbed Marcus's arm. We do what we always do. We improvise. Before he could respond, a soldier burst through the tent flap, his uniform torn, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Hostiles breached the south fence, he shouted. Fall back to secondary positions. Gunfire erupted outside. Not distant anymore. Right there. Emily's training took over. Everyone who can walk, move to the cellar now. Nurses, grab the mobile patients. People started moving, some scrambling, some being carried. Emily ran to the nearest ventilator patient, a 6-year-old boy, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. She disconnected the ventilator, grabbed the manual resuscitation bag, and started squeezing. 1 breath every 5 seconds, the rhythm she'd been doing for hours. Marcus was doing the same with another patient. We need to move them, he shouted over the noise. They won't survive the trip. They won't survive if we stay here. A burst of gunfire tore through the tent wall. Emily threw herself over the boy, shielding him with her body. The fractured ribs sent white-hot agony through her side, but she didn't let go of the bag. Keep breathing. Keep him breathing. The gunfire stopped. Emily lifted her head, looked around. The tent was in shambles. Supplies scattered, equipment destroyed, but the patients, the ones still there, were alive. For now. We're moving, she said. Now. They carried the boy on his cot, Emily squeezing the bag with one hand, Marcus carrying the oxygen tank. Every step was agony, every breath a fight. They made it to the cellar entrance just as another explosion rocked the camp. Emily stumbled, nearly dropped the bag, but Marcus caught her. I've got you, he said. They descended into the cellar. It was packed. Patients, nurses, civilians, all crammed into a space meant for supplies. The air was thick with fear and the smell of unwashed bodies. Emily found a corner, set the boy down, and kept squeezing the bag. 1 breath. 2. 3. Her arms were on fire, her ribs screaming, but she didn't stop. Marcus appeared with the other 2 ventilator patients, both being manually bagged by nurses who looked like they were about to collapse. How long can we hold out down here? Emily asked. As long as we have to. Another explosion. Dust rained from the ceiling. Someone in the corner started praying. Emily wanted to tell them to save their breath, that prayer wouldn't stop bullets or explosions or men with guns who didn't care about the sanctity of medical facilities. But she kept quiet, because maybe they needed the hope, even if it was false. Time lost meaning in the cellar. Minutes stretched into hours. The sounds of battle continued above, gunfire, explosions, shouting in languages Emily didn't understand. Her arms went numb from squeezing the bag, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The boy's lips stayed pink. His chest kept rising. That was all that mattered. Marcus rotated between the 3 ventilator patients, checking vitals, adjusting oxygen flow, doing everything he could with nothing. How's your side? He asked during one of his rounds. Fine. Liar. Emily managed a weak smile. I've had worse. When? Every other Tuesday. He almost laughed. Almost. The young nurse appeared, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Dr. Wells, we're running out of oxygen. The tanks are almost empty. Marcus closed his eyes. How long? Maybe 30 minutes, if we're lucky. Emily kept squeezing the bag. Can we refill them? Not down here, the compressor's in the main tent, which is currently a war zone. Yeah. Emily looked at the boy, 6 years old, his whole life ahead of him. And he was going to die in a cellar because they ran out of oxygen. No. She stood, her ribs protesting violently. I'm going to get more tanks. Marcus grabbed her arm. That's suicide. It's necessary. Emily, we don't have a choice. Either I go now, or we watch 3 kids suffocate. She pulled free. Keep bagging him. I'll be back in 10 minutes. And if you're not? She didn't answer, just grabbed a flashlight and headed for the stairs. The camp above was a nightmare. Fires burned everywhere, casting the destruction in flickering orange light. Bodies lay scattered, some in uniform, some not. Emily forced herself not to look too closely, not to count, not to wonder if she could have saved any of them. The main medical tent was half collapsed, one wall blown out, supplies scattered across the ground. Emily picked her way through the debris, searching for oxygen tanks. She found two, both half full. It would have to be enough. She was carrying them back toward the cellar when she heard voices. Not English, not friendly. She ducked behind a supply crate, her heart hammering. 3 men moved through the wreckage, weapons raised, searching for survivors. Or loot. Or both. Emily's hand went to her sidearm. She'd fired weapons before, in training, in self-defense, but she'd never killed anyone. She really didn't want to start now. The men moved closer. Emily held her breath, pressed against the crate. The oxygen tanks clutched in her arms. One of the men stopped, turned, looked directly at her hiding spot. She raised her weapon. The explosion that followed wasn't hers. It came from the northern perimeter, a massive detonation that lit up the night and sent the 3 men running. Emily didn't wait to see where they went. She grabbed the tanks and ran. She made it back to the cellar, her lungs burning, her sides screaming. Marcus was still bagging the boy, his face a mask of concentration. "Told you 10 minutes!" Emily gasped, setting down the tanks. Marcus looked up, relief flooding his features. "You're insane." "Yeah, but I'm back." They hooked up the new oxygen tanks, bought themselves another hour, maybe 2 if they were lucky. The battle above continued, and down in the cellar, they kept 3 children breathing. The radio crackled sometime around midnight. Ryder's voice, strained but steady. "All personnel, hostile forces are retreating. I repeat, hostiles are in retreat. Perimeter is secure." The cellar erupted in cheers and sobs and prayers of relief. Emily didn't cheer. She just kept squeezing the bag. 1 breath, 2, 3. Marcus sat down next to her, his face gray with exhaustion. "We made it. Some of us." "Yeah." They sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the camp slowly coming back to life above them. Medics calling out. Soldiers accounting for the dead and wounded. The war that never really ended, just shifting to its next phase. "I need to tell you something," Marcus said quietly. Emily didn't stop bagging. "Can it wait?" "No, because if I don't say it now, I never will." He took a breath. 8 years ago, when I testified at the review board, I told them the truth, but not the whole truth. Emily's hands faltered, just for a second. "What are you talking about?" "The patient we lost, the one I chose to let die so we could save the other 3. He looked at her. "I didn't make that call alone. You were there. You saw the same thing I did. And when I asked you what we should do, you nodded. Just once. But you nodded." Emily's blood went cold. "That's not... It is. And I let you believe for 8 years that I made that decision without you, that I threw you under the bus. But the truth is, we made it together. And when the board came down on me, I protected you. I took the full weight of it because I was senior, because it was my responsibility. But you walked away thinking I'd betrayed you when all I did was keep you from getting dragged down with me." The bag slipped from Emily's hands. The boy's chest stopped rising. She grabbed it again, started squeezing, her mind reeling. "You're lying," she said. "I'm not. Ask yourself, really ask yourself, if you remember that moment, if you remember me looking at you, waiting for confirmation, and you giving it." Emily's hands shook, because she did remember. A flash of eye contact, a moment of shared understanding, and yes, a nod. So small she'd convinced herself it hadn't happened. "I didn't," her voice cracked. "I didn't know what I was agreeing to. Neither did I, not until it was done. But we both made that choice, Emily, and I've carried the guilt for both of us ever since." She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was rewriting history, manipulating her, gaslighting her into doubting her own memory. But the truth was a sharp, cold thing in her chest. He was right. She had nodded. And then she'd spent 8 years blaming him for a decision they'd made together. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Because you needed someone to blame, and I could carry that. But I can't anymore." He stood. "So now you know. Do with it what you want." He walked away, leaving Emily alone with a dying boy and a truth that burned worse than any wound. Dawn came slowly, Painting the destroyed camp in shades of gray and ash, Emily emerged from the cellar, the boy still alive, still breathing, still fighting. Above ground, the devastation was complete. 3 tents destroyed, 15 dead, 27 wounded. Colonel Ryder found her near the ruins of the main medical tent. "You look like hell," he said. "Feel like it too." "How many did we lose down there?" "None. Not yet." Ryder nodded, something like respect in his eyes. "Command wants a full report, and they're sending an investigation team." "For what?" "The attack, the supplies, how we handled the crisis." He paused. "They're looking for someone to blame." Emily laughed. It came out bitter and sharp. "Of course they are. I'm going to recommend you for a commendation, both you and Dr. Wells. What you did down there, keeping those kids alive, that's the kind of thing people should know about. I don't want a commendation." "What do you want?" Emily looked around at the camp, at the people picking through rubble, at the bodies being carried away in black bags. "I want to go home." "Your contract's not up for another 4 months." "I know, but I'm done. I can't." She closed her eyes. "I can't do this anymore." Ryder was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'll see what I can do." He left. Emily stood there, alone in the wreckage, and felt something inside her finally break. Not crack. Break. The investigation team arrived 3 days later. 2 officers in clean uniforms who'd never seen combat, asking questions with clipboards and cameras, and the kind of detached professionalism that made Emily want to scream. They interviewed everyone: nurses, soldiers, Marcus, Emily. "Walk me through your decisions during the attack," the lead investigator said, his pen poised over his notepad. Emily sat across from him in what used to be the command tent, her ribs still taped, her exhaustion bone deep. "We prioritized patient care, evacuated who we could. Manual ventilated the critical cases. And the decision to send Ms. Carter," he checked his notes, "into an active combat zone to retrieve oxygen tanks. Who authorized that?" "No one. I made that call myself." "Without consulting Dr. Wells?" "There wasn't time." "So you acted independently, against protocol?" Emily's jaw tightened. "I acted to save lives, by risking your own." "That's the job." The investigator made a note. "And the supplies you used, the improvised saline, the water purification, none of that was approved through proper channels." "There were no proper channels. We were under siege. Nevertheless, protocol exists for a reason." Emily leaned forward, ignoring the pain in her ribs. "Let me tell you about protocol. Protocol says we wait for supplies that never come. Protocol says we let patients die while we file the right paperwork. Protocol is what gets people killed when the system breaks down." She stood. "So if you're here to tell me I did something wrong by keeping 3 kids alive, then write your report and do what you have to do. But I'm not apologizing for saving lives." She walked out before he could respond. Marcus found her an hour later, sitting on a crate near the eastern perimeter, staring at nothing. "They're going to crucify us," he said. "Probably. You could have blamed me, told them I was in charge, that all the decisions were mine." "I could have, but I didn't." Marcus sat down next to her. "Why not?" Emily thought about that. About 8 years of anger, 8 years of blame, 8 years of carrying a grudge that had poisoned everything it touched. "Because I'm tired of running from the truth," she said finally. They sat in silence, watching the sun set over a camp that looked like the end of the world. The investigation concluded a week later. The report was damning. Unauthorized medical procedures, improper use of supplies, violation of safety protocols, reckless endangerment, but buried at the end, in language so dry it was almost invisible, was a single line: "Despite numerous violations, medical staff maintained 0 preventable fatalities during the crisis period." 0. Emily read that line 3 times. 0 preventable fatalities. They'd broken every rule, violated every protocol, done everything wrong by the book, and saved everyone they could have saved. The investigator called her in one last time. "Ms. Carter, based on the findings, we're recommending disciplinary action. Suspension pending review. Possible revocation of your contract. Emily nodded. Understood. However, he set down his pen. There's a complication. What complication? Your actions during the crisis have been leaked to the media. By who, we don't know. But the story's everywhere, social media, news outlets. They're calling you a hero. Emily blinked. What? There's video. Someone recorded you carrying that boy to the cellar. Someone else recorded you going back for the oxygen tanks. It's all over the internet. Millions of views. He looked uncomfortable. Command is reevaluating their position. Meaning it's hard to punish someone the public thinks is a hero. Bad optics. Emily wanted to laugh, or cry, or both. So you're not suspending me. We're closing the investigation with a recommendation for improved training protocols and a note in your file about creative problem solving under duress. That's it? That's it. He stood. You're free to complete your contract or request early termination. Your choice. Emily left the tent, her mind spinning. She found Marcus outside, already packed, his duffel slung over one shoulder. You're leaving, she said. Yeah, contract's up in 2 days. Figured I'd get a head start. Where will you go? Don't know yet. Maybe back to the States. Maybe somewhere else, somewhere quiet. He looked at her. What about you? Early termination. I'm going home. To your husband? Emily thought about David, about the texts that had stopped coming, about the silence that said more than any argument could. I don't know if I have a home anymore. Marcus nodded. Yeah, I get that. They stood there, two people who'd spent 8 years as enemies and 1 week as something like friends. I'm sorry, Emily said, for blaming you, for making you carry that alone. I'm sorry, too, for not telling you the truth sooner. He held out his hand. She shook it. And just like that, 8 years of anger dissolved into understanding. Not forgiveness, not absolution. Just understanding. Emily boarded the transport plane 2 days later, her duffel light, her body lighter. The camp disappeared beneath her, a collection of tents and scars and memories she'd carry forever. She pulled out her phone as soon as they hit altitude. Still no signal. But she typed a message to David anyway, knowing she'd send it the moment they landed. I'm coming home. I don't know if you'll still be there when I arrive, but I'm coming home. Because I'm done running, done fighting battles that don't matter, done choosing everything else over the one person who actually gave a damn. If you'll have me, I want to try again, for real this time. No more deployments, no more running, just us. Let me know. She hit save, then closed her eyes and tried to sleep. The plane landed at Joint Base Ashford 18 hours later. Emily walked through customs in a daze, her body moving on autopilot while her mind was somewhere else entirely. Colonel Ryder met her at the gate. Welcome back, Carter. Thanks. I have something for you. He handed her an envelope. Emily opened it. Inside was a letter, official letterhead, signed by someone important she'd never heard of. Dear Ms. Carter, in recognition of your exceptional service and valor during the crisis at... She stopped reading. What is this? Commendation. Turns out saving kids while under fire plays well with the brass. They want to make an example of you, in a good way. Emily folded the letter, slid it back in the envelope. I don't want it. Figured you'd say that, but it's yours anyway, along with this. He handed her another envelope. Thicker. She opened it. Payment. Double what her contract had promised. Plus bonuses. Plus hazard pay. This is what you earned. Command decided discretion was worth more than discipline. Consider it a thank you for not talking to the press. Emily stared at the check. It was enough to cover 6 months of bills. Maybe a year, if they were careful. Enough to give her and David a real chance, if he'd take it. Thank you, she said. Ryder nodded. You did good work out there, Carter. Don't let anyone tell you different. He left. Emily stood in the terminal, surrounded by strangers coming and going, and sent the text to David. Then she waited. 5 minutes passed. 10, 15. Her phone buzzed. I'm still here. Come home. Emily closed her eyes, relief flooding through her so hard her knees went weak. She flagged a taxi, gave the driver her address, and leaned back against the seat. Home. She was going home. The house looked the same. Small. Neat. The lawn overgrown because David had never been good at yard work and she'd always been too tired to care. Emily paid the driver, shouldered her duffel, and walked up the path she'd walked 1,000 times before. The door opened before she reached it. David stood there, thinner than she remembered, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same shirt he'd been wearing the day she left. They stared at each other. "Hi," Emily said. "Hi. I'm sorry. I know. I mean it. For all of it. For choosing the job over you. For running. For—" David pulled her into a hug, cutting off the words. Emily wrapped her arms around him, breathing him in, and felt something inside her finally settle. Not heal. Settle. They stood there on the porch, holding each other, and for the first time in 6 months, Emily let herself cry. They didn't talk about it right away. Instead, they did normal things. Made dinner. Watched TV. Moved around each other with the careful politeness of people learning how to share space again. It was David who finally broke the silence. "I saw the videos," he said, "of you in the camp." Emily set down her coffee. "Oh. You could have died." "Yeah. And you went anyway." "I had to." David looked at her, and in his eyes she saw fear and pride and something that looked like resignation. "That's what scares me, that you'll always have to. That there will always be someone who needs saving more than you need to be safe." Emily didn't have an answer for that, because he was right. "I can't promise I won't do it again," she said finally. "But I can promise I won't leave you again. Not like that. Not without talking about it first." "Is that enough?" "I don't know. But it's all I have." David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The transfer. I turned it down." Emily's head snapped up. "What?" "I told them no, that I wasn't leaving, that my life was here." He took her hand. "With you." "David, I know it's not fair. I know you're the one who went to hell and back, and I'm the one who stayed home feeling sorry for myself. But I need you to understand something." He squeezed her hand. "I love you. And I'm tired of being scared all the time. So if we're going to do this, really do this, then we do it together. No more secrets. No more running. Just us." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. "Just us?" "Yeah." They sat there in the quiet of their living room, two broken people trying to put the pieces back together. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The knock on the door came 3 days later. Emily answered it, expecting a delivery or a neighbor, or maybe the mailman with a package. Instead, she found Officer Briggs standing on her porch. He looked different, thinner, older. The cocky swagger gone, replaced by something that looked like defeat. "Miss Carter," he said. Emily's hand went to the doorframe, her body automatically shifting into a defensive posture. "What do you want?" "To talk. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door in his face, to tell him to leave, to call her lawyer, but curiosity won out. 3 minutes, she said, and you stay on the porch. Briggs nodded. Fair enough. He took a breath. I'm here because I got fired last week. The department finally concluded their investigation and decided I was a liability. Badge gone. Pension gone. Career gone. Emily felt nothing. Good. Yeah, probably. He looked down at his hands. But here's the thing. Losing my job, that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I need you to know. I was wrong about everything, about you, about your husband, about how I handled that night. You think? I know. And I've spent the last 6 months trying to convince myself it wasn't my fault, that I was just doing my job, that you were the one who escalated. But I watched that video over and over, and every time I see the same thing. A cop who let his ego turn a nothing situation into a disaster. Emily crossed her arms. So what do you want? Forgiveness? No, I don't deserve that. He met her eyes. I want you to know that I'm sorry, and that what happened to you, getting fired, going through hell, that's on me. And I'm going to have to live with that. They stood there in silence. Emily wanted to hate him, wanted to feel satisfaction at his downfall, wanted to tell him his apology meant nothing, but all she felt was tired. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay? Your 3 minutes are up. You said what you came to say. Now leave." Briggs nodded. He turned to go, then stopped. "For what it's worth, the stuff you did overseas, the kids you saved, that's real heroism, not the badge and gun bullshit they teach in the academy. Real heroism." Emily didn't respond. She watched him walk down the path, get in his car, and drive away. Then she closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. David appeared from the kitchen. "Who was that?" "Nobody," Emily said. "Just a ghost." The settlement offer from Mercy Ridge arrived 2 weeks later. Full reinstatement, plus a formal apology to be read at the next board meeting, increased pay, benefits restored, and a guarantee of no retaliation. Emily read it once, then called her lawyer. "What do you think?" Lauren Hayes asked. "I think they're scared." "They should be. The publicity from your deployment made them look terrible. Firing a war hero tends to do that." Emily stared at the letter. "I don't want to go back." Silence on the other end of the line. "You sure?" Hayes asked finally. "Yeah, I'm done with that place. Done with proving myself to people who'll never really see me." She took a breath. "Counter with this, same monetary settlement, but I walk away. Clean break, no reinstatement." "That's a lot of money to leave on the table." "I don't need their money. I need my life back." Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'll make the call." The hospital agreed within 24 hours. Emily signed the papers, cashed the check, and felt a weight lift that she'd been carrying since the parking lot confrontation. She was free. Really free. She spent the next month doing nothing, sleeping in, making breakfast, taking walks with David, learning how to exist without the constant pressure of proving her worth. It was harder than she expected, but slowly she started to remember what normal felt like. Then Colonel Ryder called. "Carter, how's civilian life treating you?" "Fine." "Why?" "Because I have a proposition. Consulting work. Stateside. Training field medics. Teaching them what you learned in the camp." He paused. "It's not deployment. It's classroom work, simulations, the kind of thing you could do Monday through Friday and be home every night." Emily looked at David, who was watching her from the couch. "Let me think about it," she said. "Fair enough. Call me when you decide." She hung up. David raised an eyebrow. "Job offer?" "Yeah." "Are you going to take it?" Emily sat down next to him. "Do you want me to?" "I want you to do what makes you happy, whatever that is." She leaned her head on his shoulder. I think I need to do something. Not because I'm running, not because I'm trying to prove anything, but because sitting still makes me feel like I'm disappearing." "Then do it." "You're sure?" "Yeah, as long as you come home at night." Emily smiled. "Deal." She called Ryder back the next day and accepted. The training facility was nothing like the camps. Clean, organized, safe. Emily stood in front of a classroom of young medics, all of them eager and terrified and convinced they knew what they were walking into. She knew better. "Rule number 1, she said. Forget everything you think you know. Because the second you step into a real crisis, all your training goes out the window and you're left with instinct. So we're going to train your instincts." She spent the next 6 months teaching them, not just medical procedures, but the mental calculus of triage, the emotional cost of making impossible decisions, the way trauma accumulated in places you didn't notice until it was too late. And slowly, she started to heal. Not completely, but enough. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Emily almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail, but something made her open it. Inside was a single page, handwritten, the letters shaky but legible. "Dear Miss Carter, my name is Ahmad. You don't know me, but you saved my daughter's life. She was the little girl on the ventilator, the one you kept breathing when the machines failed. We are now in the United States, resettled as refugees. My daughter is healthy. She goes to school. She laughs. Because of you. I don't have the words to thank you properly, but I wanted you to know that what you did mattered. It mattered more than you will ever know. Thank you. Always." Emily read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She kept it in her pocket for the rest of the day. That night, lying in bed next to David, she finally spoke the words she'd been holding back for months. "I think I'm okay," she said quietly. David rolled over to face her. "Yeah?" "Yeah, I'm not perfect. I'm still angry sometimes, still scared, still wake up at night thinking I'm back there." She took his hand. "But I think I'm going to be okay." David squeezed her hand. "Good, because I am too." They fell asleep like that, hands linked, breathing in sync. And for the first time in a year, Emily didn't dream of war. 3 months later, Emily was teaching a simulation when her phone buzzed. She ignored it, focused on the training scenario, a mass casualty drill with complications. It buzzed again and again. Finally, during a break, she checked it. 7 missed calls, all from Lauren Hayes. Emily stepped outside and called back. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. In fact, everything's right." Hayes sounded breathless. "The video from the parking lot. It just won an award." "What?" "A journalism award for citizen documentation of civil rights violations. And the presenter mentioned you by name, said you were an example of courage in the face of authority. It's all over the news." Emily leaned against the building. "I don't understand." "I do. You've become a symbol, Emily, for people who are tired of being silenced, for people who want to fight back." Hayes paused. "There are organizations reaching out, civil rights groups. They want you to speak, to share your story." "I don't want to speak." "I know, but maybe it's not about what you want anymore. Maybe it's about what other people need to hear." Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders again. "I'll think about it," she said. She didn't think about it for long, because 2 days later she got a call from a woman she'd never heard of, asking if she'd be willing to mentor a young nurse who'd just been fired for reporting unsafe working conditions. And Emily realized Hayes was right. It wasn't about what she wanted anymore. It was about what she could do with what she'd survived. So she said yes, and then yes again, and again. Until she was speaking at conferences, mentoring nurses, consulting on policy changes, helping people fight the same battles she'd fought. Not because she wanted to be a hero, but because she knew how to survive. And survival was worth sharing. 6 months after that, Emily stood backstage at a medical conference, waiting to give a keynote speech about trauma, resilience, and the cost of caring. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Saw you're speaking today. Break a leg." "Not literally. We both know you've got enough broken bones already." Emily smiled and typed back. "Thanks. How are you?" "Good. Teaching at a university now. Turns out I'm decent at it when I'm not trying to save the world." "Glad to hear it." "Me too." "And Emily, for what it's worth, I'm proud of you." She stared at the message, something warm unfurling in her chest. "Thanks. That means a lot." She put the phone away as her name was called. Emily Carter walked onto the stage, looked out at the hundreds of faces staring back at her, and took a breath. "My name is Emily Carter," she said, "and I'm here to tell you that sometimes the hardest battles aren't the ones we fight with our hands. They're the ones we fight with our voices. When we refuse to be silenced, when we stand up and say, 'No, not today, not to me.'" The audience leaned forward, and Emily kept talking, sharing her story, her truth, the messy, complicated, painful reality of being someone who refused to stay quiet. When she finished, the applause was deafening. But what mattered more was the young woman who approached her afterward, tears in her eyes, and said, "Thank you. I needed to hear that." Emily took her hand. "You're going to be okay." "How do you know?" "Because you're still here, and that's how every survival story starts." That night, Emily drove home, walked through the door, and found David making dinner. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Good. Really good." "I'm glad." She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you." "For what?" "For still being here." David turned, pulled her close. "Where else would I be?" They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, and Emily felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of purpose. And that, she realized, was enough. Her phone buzzed one last time. She almost ignored it, but something made her check. An unknown number. A message that made her blood run cold. Miss Carter, my name is Detective Sarah Vance. I'm investigating irregularities in the police department's handling of your case. I have evidence that Officer Briggs wasn't working alone, that there was a coordinated effort to silence you, orchestrated by someone higher up. I need to meet with you, urgently. This goes deeper than you know. Emily stared at the message, her heart pounding. David looked over her shoulder. What is it? She showed him the text. His face went pale. What are you going to do? Emily looked at her phone, then at David, then back again, and smiled. I'm going to find out the truth. Emily met Detective Sarah Vance in a coffee shop 20 miles outside the city, far enough from Mercy Ridge that no one would recognize either of them. Vance was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of weathered face that came from years of dealing with people who lied for a living. She slid a folder across the table before Emily even sat down. Read that first, Vance said. Then we'll talk. Emily opened it. Inside were documents, emails, text messages, internal memos, all of them between Officer Briggs and someone named Deputy Chief Kenneth Harlow. The exchanges were careful, coded, but the intent was clear. Make this go away. Carter's becoming a problem. We need leverage. Hospitals cooperating. They'll handle their end. Emily's hands tightened on the folder. Harlow was coordinating with the hospital? Not just coordinating, pressuring, threatening. He called Dr. Voss personally the day after your video went viral. Told him that if Mercy Ridge didn't distance themselves from you, the department would find code violations, health inspections, whatever it took to make their lives difficult. That's extortion. Yeah, and it gets worse. Vance pulled out another document, a memo from the police union's legal counsel. They had a plan. Discredit you. Make you look unstable. Leak information about your military service. Frame it as PTSD, emotional instability, anything to undermine your credibility. Emily felt sick. Did they leak anything? They tried, but your lawyer shut it down fast, threatened countersuits. After that, they backed off. Vance leaned forward. But here's the thing. Harlow didn't stop. He's been quietly building a case against you. False allegations of interference with police business. Claims you threatened Briggs. He's been shopping it to prosecutors, trying to get charges filed. On what grounds? Fabricated ones. He's got statements from witnesses who were never at the scene, reports that contradict the video evidence. It's all manufactured. Emily stared at the documents, rage building in her chest. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm investigating Harlow for corruption. Have been for 6 months. Your case isn't the first time he's done this. It's just the most public. Vance's expression hardened. I need your help to bring him down, but I need you to understand what you're walking into. Harlow's got connections, power. He's not going to roll over quietly. Good, Emily said. Neither am I. Vance smiled. It was cold and sharp. I was hoping you'd say that. Over the next 2 weeks, Emily became intimately familiar with the inside of police precincts, lawyers' offices, and federal buildings. Vance walked her through the evidence, piece by piece, building a case that was airtight and damning. Harlow had been running a protection racket for years. Officers who screwed up, excessive force, misconduct, violations, came to him, and he made their problems disappear. In exchange, they owed him. Favors, loyalty, silence. Briggs had been one of his. The parking lot incident should have been a minor blip, a bad stop, maybe a reprimand. But Emily had recorded it, made it public, turned it into a liability. So Harlow had mobilized, leaned on the hospital, coordinated with the union, tried to bury Emily before she could become a bigger problem. He'd underestimated her. We've got him on conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power, Vance said during one of their meetings. But I need you to testify in front of a grand jury. Tell them what happened. All of it. Emily looked at David, who'd insisted on coming to every meeting. What do you think? I think you've already made up your mind, he said quietly. He was right. When do I testify? Emily asked. The grand jury hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Emily spent that time preparing with Vance and the prosecutors, going over every detail, anticipating every question. It was exhausting, but it was also clarifying, because for the first time since the parking lot, Emily wasn't defending herself. She was attacking. The night before the hearing, David found her sitting on the porch, staring at nothing. "You okay?" he asked. "No, but I will be." He sat down next to her. "You don't have to do this. You could walk away. We've got money. We've got a life. You could just let it go." Emily looked at him. "Could you?" David was quiet for a long moment. "No, I don't think I could." "Then you understand." He took her hand. "Yeah, I do." They sat there in the dark, hands linked, and Emily felt something solidify in her chest. Not certainty, resolve. The grand jury hearing took place in a sterile conference room that smelled like old coffee and furniture polish. Emily sat across from 12 strangers who held her credibility in their hands and told them everything. The parking lot, the video, the hospital firing her, the pressure from Harlow, the manufactured allegations. She spoke for 2 hours, her voice steady, her hands clasped in her lap to keep them from shaking. When she finished, the lead prosecutor asked one final question. "Ms. Carter, why are you doing this? You've already won your lawsuit. You've moved on. Why come back and fight this battle?" Emily looked at the jurors, these ordinary people who'd never know what it felt like to be dismissed, silenced, erased. "Because if I don't, nothing changes," she said. "Harlow gets away with it. The next person who tries to stand up gets crushed. And the system that's supposed to protect people just keeps protecting itself." She paused. "I'm doing this because someone has to, and it might as well be me." The room was silent. Then the foreman nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Carter. That's all we need." Emily left the building, walked to her car, and sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes, shaking. David called. "How'd it go?" "I don't know. They didn't give me any indication." "That's normal, right?" "Yeah, I think so." "Then come home. We'll deal with whatever happens when it happens." Emily started the car. "On my way." The indictment came down 4 days later. Deputy Chief Kenneth Harlow was charged with conspiracy, obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and civil rights violations. The charges were federal, which meant serious time if convicted. The news broke like a bomb. Within hours, reporters were camped outside Emily's house, demanding statements. The police union issued a scathing response, claiming the charges were politically motivated. Dr. Voss released a statement saying Mercy Ridge had always acted in good faith. Emily ignored all of it. She turned off her phone, closed the curtains, and spent the day with David, cooking dinner and pretending the world outside didn't exist. It was the most peaceful day she'd had in months. The trial started 6 weeks later. Emily wasn't required to attend every session, but she went anyway. She sat in the gallery, watching as the prosecution systematically dismantled Harlow's career, his reputation, his carefully constructed image of a dedicated public servant. Witnesses testified. Officers who'd been pressured into false reports. Hospital administrators who'd been threatened. Even Briggs took the stand, his voice hollow as he described how Harlow had coached him, told him what to say, promised to protect him if he just stuck to the script. Harlow's defense tried to paint Emily as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. They brought up her military service, suggested PTSD, implied instability. The prosecution tore them apart with medical records, character witnesses, and the video that had started everything. On the 7th day of testimony, Lauren Hayes appeared at Emily's door. "I have news, she said. Emily let her in. "Good news or bad news?" "Depends on your perspective. Mercy Ridge wants to settle. Again." "For what?" "Public apology. Formal acknowledgement that your termination was retaliatory. And they want to establish a whistleblower protection policy in your name." Emily sat down. "They want to use me for PR. Basically, but it's a real policy, real protections. It could help other people in your position. What do they want in return? Your endorsement, a statement saying you support the changes, maybe a photo op." Emily looked at David, who was listening from the kitchen. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think you should do whatever feels right," he said. "But if it helps someone else avoid what you went through, maybe it's worth it." Emily turned back to Hayes. "I'll do it, but on one condition. The policy includes mandatory training on civil rights and accountability. For everyone. From the janitors to the board." Hayes smiled. "I'll make the call." The settlement was announced 2 days later. Emily stood next to Dr. Voss, who looked like he'd aged 10 years, and read a prepared statement about the importance of speaking up, protecting workers, and creating cultures of accountability. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Emily answered 3, then walked away. Because this wasn't her victory. It was just another step. The verdict in Harlow's trial came on a Thursday, guilty on all counts. Emily heard the news on the radio while driving home from the training facility. She pulled over, hands shaking, and let the reality sink in. It was over. Really over. David called 30 seconds later. "Did you hear?" "Yeah." "How do you feel?" Emily thought about that. Tired, relieved, and a little bit empty. Empty. Like I spent so long fighting, I don't know what to do now that the fight's done. David was quiet for a moment. "Then I guess you figure it out. Together." Emily smiled. "Yeah, together." The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 months later. Emily attended, sitting in the front row as Harlow, once powerful, once untouchable, stood before a judge and heard his fate. 15 years. No parole for the first 7. Harlow's face went white. His lawyer tried to argue for leniency, but the judge shut him down. "You abused your position. You violated the public trust. You weaponized the justice system against people trying to exercise their constitutional rights." The judge's voice was steel. "This sentence reflects the severity of your crimes and serves as a message that no one is above the law." Harlow was led away in handcuffs. Emily watched him go and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a quiet sense of completion. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Emily gave a brief statement, thanked Detective Vance and the prosecutors, and left. But as she walked to her car, someone called her name. She turned. It was a young woman, mid-20s, with nervous eyes and a hospital ID badge clipped to her scrubs. "Miss Carter? I'm sorry to bother you, but I needed to say thank you." Emily blinked. "For what?" "For fighting. For not giving up. I work at Mercy Ridge, and last month I reported a supervisor for falsifying patient records. And because of the policy you helped create, I didn't get fired. I got protected, and the supervisor got investigated." Tears welled in her eyes. "So thank you for making it possible for people like me to do the right thing without losing everything." Emily felt something crack in her chest. Not break. Open. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jessica." "Jessica, you didn't need me to do the right thing. You did that yourself. I just helped make it a little less terrifying." Jessica smiled, wiped her eyes, and walked away. Emily stood there watching her go and realized something. This was the victory. Not the trial. Not the verdict. Not the policy change. This. One person being able to speak up without fear. If that was all she'd accomplished, it was enough. 6 months later, Emily stood in front of a room full of medical professionals at a national conference. She'd been invited to speak about ethics, accountability, and the cost of silence. She looked out at the audience, nurses, doctors, administrators, and saw herself in every face. People who cared, people who were tired, people who'd been pushed to the edge and told to smile through it. "I'm not here to tell you that fighting back is easy," she said. "It's not. It's terrifying. It's exhausting. It will cost you things you didn't know you could lose. But here's what I've learned. Silence costs more. Every time we stay quiet to protect ourselves, we pay for it in pieces of our soul. And eventually, there's nothing left." The room was silent. So speak up. Not because it's easy, not because you'll win, but because staying silent kills something inside you that you'll never get back. And you're worth more than that. The applause started slowly, then built until it filled the room. Emily stepped off the stage and found David waiting in the wings. You were amazing, he said. I was terrified. Doesn't make it less amazing. They walked out together, through the conference center, past booths and displays and people networking. Emily's phone buzzed. She checked it. A message from Marcus. Saw your keynote online. You've come a long way from the medic who used to argue with me about triage protocols. Proud of you. Emily typed back. Thanks. You too. Heard your program's training the next generation of combat medics. That's real impact. We all do what we can. Yeah, we do. She put the phone away and looked at David. You know what I want to do? What? Go home. Make dinner, watch a movie, be boring and normal and not think about any of this for at least 24 hours. David grinned. Best idea you've had all year. They went home. Life didn't stop being complicated. Emily still had nightmares, still woke up some mornings feeling the weight of every decision she'd made, every person she couldn't save, every battle that had taken pieces of her. But she also had good days. Days where she taught and mentored and watched people learn from her mistakes. Days where David made her laugh. Days where she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was building something worth keeping. 1 year after Harlow's sentencing, Emily received a letter from the state medical board. They wanted to honor her with an award for advocacy and ethical leadership. She almost declined, but David convinced her to accept. It's not about you being perfect, he said. It's about you being real. And showing people that you can survive the worst and still choose to keep fighting. So she went. The ceremony was formal, filled with people in suits who gave speeches about integrity and courage. Emily sat through it, feeling out of place in a borrowed dress, wondering if she'd made a mistake. Then they called her name. She walked to the podium, accepted the plaque, and looked out at the audience. I'm not good at speeches, she started. And I'm definitely not good at being honored for things that felt more like survival than heroism. But I'll say this, the system we work in is broken. It protects the wrong people and punishes the right ones. And until we're willing to burn down the parts that don't work and rebuild them into something better, nothing's going to change. Someone in the audience gasped. Emily kept going. So if you're going to honor me, honor the messy parts too. The parts where I was angry and scared and didn't know what I was doing. The parts where I almost gave up. Because that's the truth. And the truth is the only thing worth celebrating. She stepped down from the podium. Half the audience applauded. The other half looked scandalized. Emily didn't care. She'd said what needed to be said. 2 years after everything started, Emily sat on her porch, watching the sun set, a mug of coffee cooling in her hands. David was inside, cooking dinner, humming off-key to some song on the radio. Her phone rang. Detective Vance. Long time, Emily said, answering. Too long. How are you? Good. Busy. Training's going well. Life's stable. Glad to hear it. I'm calling because I wanted to give you an update. Remember how I said your case wasn't Harlow's first? Yeah. Well, your testimony opened the floodgates. We've had 17 more people come forward. Officers, civilians, all with stories about Harlow or officers in his network. We're building cases against 6 more officials. Emily's breath caught. 17? 17. And every single one of them mentioned you, said watching you fight gave them the courage to do the same. Emily closed her eyes, overwhelmed. You still there? Vance asked. Yeah, I'm here. I didn't realize. That's the thing about change. You never see the full impact while you're in it. But you started something, Carter. Something bigger than one case or one corrupt cop. You started people believing they could fight back. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing what you're doing because we need more people like you. Vance hung up. Emily sat there, the phone still pressed to her ear, tears streaming down her face. David stepped outside. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She wiped her eyes. Vance said 17 more people came forward because of me. 17. David sat down next to her, pulled her close. You changed things. I just didn't want to be quiet, and that was enough. They sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Emily thought about the parking lot, about Briggs and Harlow and Voss and everyone who'd tried to make her disappear. They'd failed. Not because she was stronger, smarter, or braver, but because she'd refused to accept that silence was the only option. "David?" she said quietly. "Yeah?" "Thank you for staying, for believing me, for not giving up when I was ready to." "You never gave up. Not once. I wanted to. But you didn't. That's what matters." Emily leaned into him, feeling the weight of 2 years slowly lifting. It wasn't gone. It would never be fully gone. But it was lighter, manageable, survivable. 3 years after the parking lot, Emily received an invitation to speak at a police academy. Not as a critic, as a partner in reform. She almost said no, but curiosity won out. The academy was everything she expected, rigid, hierarchical, filled with young recruits who looked at her like she was an enemy. Emily stood at the podium and looked out at them. "I'm here because I filed a complaint against one of your own," she started. "And that complaint led to investigations, indictments, and convictions. Some of you probably hate me for that. And that's fine. But I want you to understand something. I didn't go after Officer Briggs because I hate cops. I went after him because he abused his power. And when people in positions of authority abuse their power, they don't just hurt individuals, they hurt the entire system." A hand went up in the back. A young recruit, barely out of his teens. "Yes?" Emily said. "How are we supposed to do our jobs if we're constantly worried about being recorded and sued?" Emily smiled. It wasn't warm. By doing your jobs correctly, by treating people with respect, by remembering that your badge doesn't make you better than anyone else, it makes you responsible to everyone else. The recruit sat down, chastened. Emily continued. "Here's the truth. Most of you will be good officers. You'll help people, save lives, make a difference. But some of you won't. Some of you will let the power go to your head. And when that happens, I hope your colleagues have the courage to stop you before you become another Briggs or Harlow." She paused, because accountability isn't the enemy of good policing. It's the foundation. The lecture ended with scattered applause. Emily packed up her notes, expecting to leave quickly. Instead, a line formed. Recruits wanting to shake her hand, instructors thanking her for her honesty. One older sergeant pulled her aside. "I was at the academy when Briggs went through," he said quietly. "I saw the red flags, the attitude, the entitlement. And I didn't say anything because I thought it wasn't my place." He met her eyes. "I'm sorry for not stopping him before he got to you." Emily's throat tightened. "You're stopping the next one. That's what matters." He nodded, shook her hand, and walked away. Emily left the academy feeling something she hadn't expected. Hope. Not naive hope. Not the kind that ignored reality, but the kind that acknowledged how broken things were and still believed they could get better. 4 years after the parking lot, Emily and David sat in their living room watching the news. A story about police reform, about departments implementing new training, about accountability measures inspired by cases like hers. "Look at that," David said. "You're famous." "I'm not famous. I'm just the person who refused to shut up." "Same thing." Emily laughed. "No, it's really not." The doorbell rang. Emily answered it. A delivery person stood there with a package. She signed for it, brought it inside, and opened it. Inside was a book. Brand new. The cover showed a silhouette of a person standing against a sunset. The title read, "When Silence Costs Too Much, Stories of Ordinary People Who Changed the System." Emily flipped it open. The dedication page stopped her cold. For Emily Carter, who showed us that refusing to be silent is the first step toward change. She turned the page. Chapter 1 was her story. But it wasn't the only one. There were dozens. Nurses, teachers, soldiers, civilians, all people who'd stood up against systems designed to crush them, all people who'd refused to disappear. Emily read through the night, tears streaming down her face, David asleep on the couch next to her. And when she finished, she understood. Her fight hadn't just been about her. It had been about showing people that fighting was possible, that survival wasn't the same as submission, that silence, no matter how safe it felt in the moment, always cost more than speaking up. 5 years after the parking lot, Emily stood in front of a mirror adjusting her collar. She was older now, gray streaking through her hair, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But her eyes were clear, steady, unafraid. David appeared behind her. Ready? As I'll ever be. They drove to the ceremony together. Another award, another speech, another reminder that her story had become public property. But this time was different. This time, she'd been asked to present an award to someone else. A young teacher who'd reported abuse at her school and faced retaliation, who'd fought back and won. Emily stood backstage, waiting for her cue, and thought about the parking lot. And thought about Briggs and the red and blue lights, and the moment she'd decided that silence wasn't an option, she'd been terrified, angry, alone, but she'd spoken up anyway. And it had cost her everything and given her everything. Not money or fame or recognition, but purpose. The knowledge that what she'd survived mattered, that her refusal to disappear had created space for others to be seen. The announcer called her name. Emily walked onto the stage, looked out at the audience, and smiled. 5 years ago, she said, I was standing in a parking lot, watching my husband being detained for no reason, and I made a choice. I could stay quiet, keep my head down, protect myself, or I could speak up, knowing it would cost me. She paused. I chose to speak up. And it did cost me, my job, my peace, my sense of safety. But it also gave me something I didn't know I needed. It gave me proof that I mattered, that my voice had power, that silence is never the answer when injustice is the question. The audience was silent. So tonight, I'm here to honor someone who made the same choice, who looked at a broken system and said, no, not on my watch, who fought even when it hurt, who refused to let fear win. She called the teacher's name. The woman walked onto the stage, young and scared and brave, and Emily saw herself 5 years ago. She handed over the award, hugged the woman, and whispered in her ear, You're going to be okay, I promise. The woman smiled, tears in her eyes. How do you know? Because you're still here, and that means you've already won. The ceremony ended. Emily and David drove home, the night quiet around them. You know what I realized? Emily said. What? I spent so long fighting to prove I mattered, but I always mattered. The system just didn't want me to know it. David squeezed her hand. And now? Now I know, and I'm never forgetting it again. They pulled into their driveway. Emily looked at the house, small, simple, theirs, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Complete. Not perfect. Not healed. Not done processing the trauma or the anger or the cost. But complete, because she'd fought and survived, and turned her survival into something that mattered. Inside, her phone buzzed one last time, a message from a number she didn't recognize. Miss Carter, you don't know me, but I wanted to thank you. I was about to quit, about to give up. Then I saw your story, and I realized I could fight back. So I did, and I won. Thank you for showing me it was possible. Emily read the message twice. Then she typed back, You showed yourself. I just walked the path first. Proud of you. She set the phone down, curled up next to David on the couch, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow there would be more fights, more people who needed help, more systems that needed changing. But tonight, she rested, because she'd earned it. And because she knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that her refusal to be silenced had rippled out into the world in ways she'd never fully see. That somewhere, someone was reading her story and finding the courage to speak up. That her fight had become their permission, and that was legacy enough. Emily Carter had walked into a parking lot 5 years ago as a woman the world tried to ignore. She'd walked out as someone impossible to silence, and nothing, no system, no authority, no threat, would ever make her forget that again.